Okay,
Right.
I'm recording, so.
Okay. So if you checked into the module over the weekend, you saw a lot more information than if you checked into the module today, you saw a lot of strike-throughs. So the big news is that our schedule is really in flux, because I realized over the next 3 meetings, I will be in a car or in my second day in the new office. So we are kind of pulling back, and instead of diving right into the threshold concepts, we're actually going to help support you to keep looking through the lens of RSD, and then we're thinking maybe around March diving back into a new frame. And I actually think that might be best anyway, because it can feel unproductive to switch lenses too quickly. So I was a little hesitant about that fast move anyway. You guys have any thoughts about that?
I don't have a problem with it. I think I've kind of adapted what we've been doing to my own purposes. So I know that I haven't been super productive about coming up with a project in the sort of structure that you folks came up with, but you've been really flexible on working with that. And so I've been having a lot of fun playing with the RSD.
Good.
And I'm super excited about the framework as well. So I can't, I'm good with whatever you choose to do.
Okay.
I like that this will give me a chance to, so because I've just been trying to tread water with my first semester, I haven't had a lot of opportunities to try out anything. So this gives me, a month or 2 with a new class to play around with the RSD. So it looks like I am going to teach the class that I was planning to do the research.
Yay!
But it will have, as of right now, there are 4 students.
Well, that's good. It's a good alpha test.
Yeah, so I'm taking it as, if I try something really crazy and it fails, there's less collateral damage this way.
What's nice with 4 students too is you can give them some autonomy in helping to construct some of that,
That's what I'm
which
hoping
can be really great.
And you have an awesome opportunity to model exactly what we want our students to be doing, which is that freedom to explore and ask questions and say, how is this going to work? Let's do this together. So I think you have a really cool opportunity there to frame it the way you want it.
They see it that way as well, because sometimes freedom can be scary. But.
I'm laughing because next week my students get to demonstrate that freedom that I've just given them. So their final is demonstrate your appropriate educational risk, demonstrate what you learned, and demonstrate your information literacy skills. Don't care how you do it. So
oh man.
Sylvia's students were tasked at the beginning to come up with their own assessment.
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Which you can probably talk a little bit about their experience and the kind of pushback you've gotten and how some of them have made that leap.
So they're not ready to do their own assessment. They were still grasping with, how do I demonstrate this? And it seems like educational risk and what I learned kind of are the same thing, which is their aha moment, like you can't learn anything if you don't take any kind of risk. So at the beginning of the class, I asked them I told them they were going to be demonstrating their information literacy, and I said, I will walk you through those skills as part of the research project, but we're doing other stuff and you need to show me how you're taking appropriate educational risk, and I'm going to ask you to show me how you've demonstrated learning and technology growth, etc. And I spent 2 or 3 days providing them with websites and places to go, how your students can demonstrate learning. And we spent days and days looking at them. I had them play, gave them time to play, and I said, the end of the semester, I want you to demonstrate this for me. And their reaction was deer in the headlights. How am I going to do this? I'm like, I don't know. How are you going to do it? And they were angry with me. They were frustrated. If looks could kill, I would be bleeding out on the floor several times over. And at the end, I gave them time to, just last week, I gave them some time to work on their projects, whatever they are, and do a reflection. And they were, at the beginning of the semester, I was really angry, but now I see that I can select my own learning activities and it's kind of fun. I don't need a teacher to learn. And I can, and et cetera, et cetera. So I've only seen a couple of them, but the ones I've seen, they struggled at the beginning, but were now liberated. So this was my alpha test. I'm going to turn around and do data collection and try to formulate a research question based on what I found. So I may put it up there and have you folks pick away intentionally, like pick at it and see, you know, what are the weaknesses? What don't you get? What do you think I should try? Because I really am going to try to implement it as a study next semester. But I've got to formulate it into a coherent question. But it was an interesting experiment to do with my students.
What's the context of the class? Like, is the class on learning and risk, or is the class on a different context?
The class is on the impacts of technology on learning in the broadest sense of the terms. It's a gen ed class. It serves the early childhood education program, but it also is an elective in the society technology, STS, society technology something, minor. And so I get some like gamers in there. I've had golf management in there. And I've had 2 complaints over the past years. One is I want to learn a specific technology, but the specific technologies they want to learn will be obsolete in a couple months. And what's good for early childhood educators isn't good for golf management students. And so that didn't work. And the other one was you just have us do busy work. So, and the third one was the student who a couple of years ago held up a cell phone and said, you can't teach me anything because everything I need to know I can find on this.
That was the beginning of the fire under Sylvia's butt.
Yep.
3 years, I'll say.
Yep. So I have spent 3 years making damn sure whatever assignment I give them, they cannot find on Google. And I'm never worried about them cheating because the assignments are structured, they can't. And so now when I have so the backdrop then is that part of the requirements is they will do research so they can show how they can critically think and communicate effectively. So that's part of it. And I walk all of the students through a research project, and it takes about 6 weeks, and it's very small and very limited. And I get them to build skill through formative assessment. So Sandra, you were talking about annotated bibliographies and citations. Yeah, bang head here. I'm still banging my head. But that comes in terms of formative assessments, and here redo it until you get it right about 2 or 3 times, and then I give up too. But at the end, they have a research project, and then they're going to have this portfolio. So
That's really cool. I feel like I'm teaching this class on risk and exploration right now, and that's like the entire content is how do we learn through risk and exploration. And so I love this idea of telling them at the beginning that they have to design their own assessment. I think I'm curious to see how it works out for you and what you have to say about it, because that is something I could see working really well in my class. Just giving them this freedom to explore and figure out how you show me what you've learned.
Yep. And for me, one of the real big issues is everybody keeps talking about how students have been helicopter parented, they can't do this right, they can't do that right. And I sit back and look. I was especially looking at one of my colleagues who was complaining a lot, but then had everything so structured that the students couldn't like even decide how to cross a T or dot an I. It's like you want them to explore as long as they do it your way and follow your directions one-on-one. So like, well, when do they ever get to practice? And I also keep it safe. I've structured everything in the class so that they should be able to demonstrate something if they just do the assignments. So go out and find a website you've never seen before and do something with it, or this or this. And so if they try anything, they have to not do the assignment to not get anything for the end of the semester.
That's kind of how I've structured it. They have weekly, I call them explorations, and so every week they get a prompt, and sometimes it's find a new or go find a new place on campus. Sometimes it's find a new website. Sometimes it's watch a new show or listen to a new song, and then reflect on that and say, what did you learn? How does it tie into what you're doing? And I give them all kinds of, like, you can write a blog post, you can make me an infographic, you can do a photo collage. And it's interesting that students want all of that, and then they don't often take advantage of it. So that's been a really interesting thing for me. I'm going to go through at the end of the semester and run up some numbers on who did what and kind of see how it all shakes out.
Yeah. So
would it be interesting and helpful to anyone if we either drop some of the resources that Sylvia uses into the module, or maybe that early January meeting she would walk through some of the ways and you could visually see some of what she does?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's kind of veering a little bit from RSD, but that embark and clarify and the inquiry mindset seems to be where we keep coming back to. So
I know that's where I'm at repeatedly, always.
yeah. All right.
Note, actually, I have been it's always backwards when I show you. But I have been looking at this book. I haven't gotten too far into it, but it's called Make Just One Change, Teach Students to Ask Their Own Questions, by Rothstein and Santana. And it talks about teaching students structures for divergent thinking, convergent thinking, metacognition. It seems to be kind of like a pretty defined like system of maybe teaching students that, but could be some good stuff to pull out of it. So I can also send in an email the title of this if you want to look at it and see if it will help you.
So here's a research question that comes directly from that. It's very difficult to teach students to do metacognition. I've done research on it, and I've added metacognitive exercises and things, and the students who are good at metacognition use them, and the students who are not poor still don't use them and still don't benefit. So all the things that you can do with Canvas and other learning management systems really help with metacognition, because you can self-test, you can interact with peers, and I found that students who got good metacognitions do those things. So how about this embark and clarify an RSD framework? Is there a way, some of you teach it to the students explicitly. So I have used it as a teaching tool, but I haven't said, okay, now here you are on it. I haven't had the students look at the framework, just faculty. If we teach the students that framework, will it affect their metacognition? That's a research question.
Well, we, in our first community of practice, had a few faculty members kind of measuring that exact question. And what we found was that students are not good at identifying where they're at on the RSD. So where they would rate themselves and where a teacher would rate them would not match very well. Which makes sense because they don't have the contextual understanding for the whole kind of research and information ecosystem. And I really feel like, this is disappointing since we just put this off, I really feel like that's where the information literacy threshold concepts come in, because they can go out and find an article in a database, but to really assess if it's a relevant article, they have to understand some of those wider concepts like scholarship is a conversation. Information has value and is used for different purposes. So those threshold concepts start getting, I think that is the doorway into the metacognition for research skills.
So I was just thinking, if we had it as part of our syllabus, say, and structured a course, and had formative assessments for the students to self-assess on the different parts of either one of those, or probably not both at the same time, that might improve it, and we could assess that because we know how to assess metacognition.
Sure. You could try it and then report back to us.
When I teach again. So yeah, for me, one thing at a time is impossible.
Agreed.
Really good advice. It's just not my way. So
I'm not a very good multitasker myself.
In my course this term, and it's not because I'm new.
It would be interesting to play around with that. So I found that I really liked the RSD, but the longer I worked with it, the more it fell short in and of itself. So I'm starting to integrate the framework for information literacy. The RSD tells the students what or where they are, but the framework for information literacy tells them why it's important. And I'm starting to get them to intentionally reflect both that. I introduce it at the beginning, I have them reflect at midterm and at the end of the semester. And I just read some of the reflections. I'd have to say that there's maybe 5% who like, yeah, I never used them. Don't see the point, don't see the value. I have to go back and look at where their grades are in terms of the whole process. I had one person tell me they didn't like the RSD framework, and she knew everything there was to know about research, and she was going to go back to her program and do research the right way. And I laughed. I even told her that. I said, I'm smiling as I read your post because the people who introduced me to the RSD framework are the people who lead your program. So, because she was a psychology major, so I was laughing at that.
Yeah.
And she's the one who had some of the worst research questions in her project, even after I spoke to her about how she might tweak them. So yeah, there's interesting caveats like that, but I still have a ways to go. I have an example of a threshold concept revelation that Jessy and I were talking about the other day. So when we get there, you can see my aha moment. But I'm starting to work with information literacy and combining it with the RSD framework. And hopefully it'll be helpful for students. I don't know. I've got to figure out a way to measure that. So there's a way to shut down the conversation.
I don't know if anybody had a chance to look. Early on in the semester, I had introduced the RSD to my students and then had a whole bunch of different small assignments. They went to the library, we talked about sources, and they've been in the midst of working on this 3-page paper on a topic. Essentially, I gave them a book, Mary Roach's Packing for Mars, and they could pick anything in the book as their topic. So there was some structure, but pretty open-ended. And so they finished their first draft, they brought it to class, they did peer reviews on it, and then they're working on their final draft right now. And I gave them back a copy of the RSD Pentagon. And I wrote this packet that basically asked them to pick 2 examples of where they did each of the facets and then articulate what they did and how that connected to another facet. really trying to emphasize this like nonlinear process that we go through for that. And so I put a copy of that in the forum and put some words up there for it too. But that turned out to be way harder than I would have imagined. Like, this just was like, they didn't know what I wanted. They thought that I wanted like a generic, here's how these things connect. And so I was like, no, I want specific things that you did. And so we've ended up spending way more time on that than I had actually anticipated, which I think is really good. But I think it matches with what you're all saying, that it's really hard for students to see how they're using this, and this idea of breaking everything down into smaller and smaller steps. They don't understand that these things that they're doing are part of this process. Like they would tell me, well, I found sources. I'm like, okay, well, what did you do with them? Well, then I collated the information. I'm like, no. What did you do after you found them? You read them. Like, that's part of the analyze. Like, so getting them to think about these things in a way that fits into the framework was really challenging. Yeah.
Thanks, Arity, for pointing me to that. I'll take a look. But yeah, the posting I did last night absolutely echoes what you're saying, because as a librarian, after this session, you'll have 3 sources, right? It's that find and generate emphasis. Yep. And yeah, and I want to get out of that. I want to break that. But but then the students, they don't like that. It's wasted time if they're doing anything else but finding and generating in a library session.
Mm-hmm. I would be interested in not teaching the RSD explicitly, but the first week having them draw research, and then teaching them, whether it be like through threshold concepts, kind of backdoor, or actually teaching them RSD based skills as they go along, and then have them draw research again at the end, and maybe then show them the RSD, maybe not. But see how their conceptual idea of what research is changes over the semester. Or we did this in a conference session, and I've seen it done with students, is instead of having them draw it individually, have them, like, it's basically the making toast, the Wujek making toast process, which is they could do it alone or in pairs, like have sticky notes, like 1 step of research per sticky note. And then we actually had big posters. There was Embark and Clarify, Find and Generate. We had them on the wall, and we had them, conference participants, go up and categorize their own sticky notes. So you could do just the sticky notes at the beginning, and at the end put up the posters and have them categorize their own. So they've kind of constructed it.
It's an interesting way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I have known about the RSD since John first started presenting on it. So I've known about it for 10 or 15 years, and I have never taught it explicitly to the students.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's got to be a reason that I only understanding how I structure curriculum. I've tried to pass it on to my colleagues every time. I mean, I'll come back from a conference, I'm all fired up. And I'll say, look at this, it's so well organized, it covers everything. And they don't, I think they get boggled by the fact that it's so comprehensive. And so they keep saying, well, we'll use this other thing that's simpler. Yeah. They'll use something else. And it might not be as good, but it's easier for people to approach. So even faculty have a hard time looking at it. Now, John's done a lot to make it easier to approach. So the Pentagon is easier for a lot of people than the grid. But using it after the fact with students might be better. So that's an intriguing idea to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I tried giving students the whole framework. I would not do that again. I give them the Pentagon because that's where they're at. I've given my colleagues the whole RSD framework. they need to have a need for it before they'll adopt it. Without a need, it's a nice, pretty chart, Sylvia. Thank you for sharing. We will provide lip service. I think what you're doing is important, and I'll hang it on my wall. Thank you for sharing. And then we'll be in conversations where they're like, oh, students don't get da 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 da. And I'll say, well, there is a tool you might use for that. They just, over time, they start to appreciate it, but you got to catch them when they need it or want it and point out how it could help them. And I've done some workshops for my colleagues, so they were kind enough to come. I don't know whether or not they use it or not, but it takes time.
Mm-hmm. I had a kind of a fun experience. I'm working with a physics and chemistry education major, and we're coming up with a project for him next spring. And he was in my office when I had the RSD up on my computer, and he goes, oh, what's that? I was like, oh. So we got to talking about it, and he wants to go through and use that as a way to help him figure out his research project, which I'm very excited about. So he's like, they didn't show me anything about this in my education classes. So.
Well, you can go ahead and share with him our meeting videos, the content-based ones especially.
I'll do that.
Be a helpful introduction.
Yeah.
Not that he wants to watch us talking heads yammer, but
yeah.
Any other connecting aha ideas you want to capitalize on as we chat?
I'd like to say thanks for being bold and risking all of the opportunities for online catastrophes and doing so with a good grace. So for me, a lot of this is just how does it really work with a community of practice that's dispersed and as different in our things that we teach, and to see how that community of practice works and how you set it up. And so you are pretty much pioneers, and there are all sorts of ways for things to go wrong, and some of them did, and you just kept going. So the process has been very valuable to me, and I guess we could be very meta about it and say, well, you're using the RSD and the information literacy facets and solving all these problems and doing it. But of course, that's the reality of life. It's not something that we just use for student research projects. Mm-hmm. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming along the journey with us. You've made it fun.
So we're going to start again in March.
What do you think, Sylvia?
So one of the things, yes, we're going to start on the framework for information literacy in March, but I'm going to start I need to start my real research project next spring. So I'll probably post some stuff up there. You're welcome to engage with it or not. You're welcome to shred it, be brutally honest. I won't be offended. Jessy has helped me grow a lot. I really like feedback, so I might post what I'm doing for you folks to take a look at. But I think, yeah, we'll officially come back in March. But before we leave today, we should also really discuss schedules. My schedule, I now have a better handle on than I did a couple of weeks ago. I'm hoping you folks do too. So it would be, there's no reason that we can't connect, unofficially. As Jessy moves, I'm happy to create a Zoom meeting if we need to, or if you would like to. But we would like to have a time when we can all meet. And Tuesdays work pretty well for me, and I have all of Tuesday flexible. Jessy said that her company is going to willingly let her stay engaged with the community, so that's good. So we just need to figure out if there's a good time for all of us to meet.
It looks like Tuesdays are still going to be the best, but we're going to look at changing the time. And Dustin, I think you were pretty restrictive or still really in flux. So
I think things are settling down now, assuming that the administration allows me to teach a class of 4 students. But it's, yeah. Well, we'll go with that for now. So that makes my gap would be noon to 1. I could meet, or
for you.
Yes, or anytime before 11.
Okay.
So before 11, so that even at 9, that would put are you 2 hours?
I'm in Mountain Time. Yeah.
1 hour behind us.
1 hour? Okay.
Yeah.
Just 1 hour.
Okay. Before 11, so we could meet at 9 a.m.
Which would be 10 a.m. for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I can meet at 7 a.m. if you need to.
No, that's okay.
Arity, what does your schedule look like?
Right now, everything that's formal happens in the afternoons. So like 1 to 5, I think is what I'm looking at. So things that happen in the morning would be fine. Typically, that's not going to be the case on like Thursdays and Fridays. Those tend to be the times that people fill in with meetings. So Tuesdays, 9 or 10 in the morning would be fine.
Okay.
Kristen, how about for you?
Yep, mornings are better.
All right. Sandra, are you going to be joining us in the spring, or?
If I can, but I'm on sabbatical.
Ah.
So
You
I'll
can
be
pop
writing
in
every
and out
day.
as much as you want.
Yeah. So I'll be writing out all day, and I will give you feedback as I can find time, because I've done a whole lot of this kind of research that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you can never have enough people to give you opinions.
Yay!
So
It's
what
all-
about
It's all good.
Tuesdays at 9:30 Central? Wait, would that be right?
I thought it was 9:30 Mountain.
So 10:30 Central,
That sounds good.
10:30, 11. That gives us an hour and a half. So you're not totally squished at the back end. Okay. So 10:30.
11:30 Eastern, and there might be some more Easterners.
Ah, okay. Does that work for you, Sandra?
I'm on sabbatical.
Yeah.
I have nothing scheduled except writing.
Yay! Good for you. Sounds like an awesome opportunity.
10:30 Central. And that works for you, Kristen.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thanks.
All right.
Yay! We've got a time.
Mm-hmm. So far we've been using the modules to really direct our activities. I think what's going to happen is the modules are going to be used more to push out resources pertaining to whatever we talk about after the fact now. I'll still put the Zoom meeting in there, but any direction of our activities will probably come more through email now, if that sounds okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because it's going to be a lot more collaborative directioning at this point. Until March, I think we'll do like 3 sessions to get us going into the framework. And those might be a little bit more like what we're used to in the modules. But between now and then, we'll direction through email and we'll push resources out through modules. Sound good?
That work? All right, good. And then if as Jessy moves, don't be shy about contacting either her or me. I'll be happy to answer your questions as well, or if Jessy falls off the planet for a while, a day or two, no more than a day or two, you know, I'll do my best to help as well. So anyway, it'll be exciting. So play with the RSD, because when we come back, we're really going to switch lenses to the framework for information literacy, and that just opens it. I won't lie, it'll take a while, but it's kind of fun to play with. Well, for you folks who are librarians, it won't take any time, but for those of us who are not, you'll have to be patient with at least me. but it's fun.
My last just note is that I'm gonna have to switch to my personal email address, and you're used to seeing my employee email address. So take note of that and make sure you get it switched out in your contacts. I will email that out this week.
Any other comments, discussions you folks have?
Not right now. Thank you for everything.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Have a
thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.